Welcome to the first episode of our course, Understanding Tribal Treaties and Reserved Rights, a 5-episode course. In this episode, The Unique Status of Tribal Nations, we embark on the first key step of our journey, explaining the unique status of tribal nations, sometimes called tribes or Indian tribes, that the United States has recognized as sovereigns within the United States governmental structure. After completing this section, U.S. federal government employees will have a deeper understanding and appreciation of tribal sovereignty and be able to describe why it is important. Throughout this course, you will have the chance to hear directly from tribal leaders. We are grateful to these tribal leaders for sharing their own and their tribe's experiences and views, so that you, as federal employees, are better able to understand tribal perspectives when working on matters that intersect with tribal interests. Please note that these tribal leaders joined us as representatives of their sovereign nations and are not providing the views or opinions of the federal government.
Tribal sovereignty is a term you've probably heard, but what does it really mean? While there are many aspects to this concept, simply put, it refers to the political and legal authority of tribal nations to govern themselves and make their own laws. Through this authority, tribes preserve their cultures, control and steward their economies, protect their homelands and resources, and make decisions about how best to meet the needs of their people, among numerous other rights and authorities. Tribal nations are sovereign governmental entities, not simply communities of people. Each tribal nation has its own current or historic lands, as well as its own unique laws, culture, and history.
The United States has a nation-to-nation relationship with federally recognized tribes, which is reflected in the Constitution of the United States, treaties, statutes, executive orders, and court decisions. This means that the United States acknowledges and respects those tribes as inherently self-governing sovereigns.
Federal recognition of an Indian tribe means that the federal government acknowledges, as a matter of law, a particular Indian group as a tribal nation that has a government-to-government relationship with the United States. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, publishes a list of federally recognized tribes that can be found online and in the Federal Register.
The United States also has a general trust relationship with each tribe in which the United States government has charged itself with moral obligations of the highest responsibility and trust. The nature of the trust relationship is defined by federal law, including treaties, statutes, executive orders, and federal regulations. This trust responsibility stems from the United States' unique legal and political relationship with tribes. You may also hear the phrase tribal self-determination. For at least the last 50 years, the federal government has worked with tribes to promote and support tribal self-governance and the growth and enhancement of tribal institutions, a policy known as tribal self-determination. The federal government's support for tribal self-determination marked a key change from prior policies that, over many decades and with few exceptions, sought to displace tribes and to narrow or terminate their sovereignty, either directly or by depriving tribes of their members through forced assimilation. The challenging history between the U.S. government and tribal nations colors our relationship today. We'll discuss those challenges throughout this series. This course and subsequent courses are part of a larger effort to repair and renew the relationship between the federal government and tribal nations.
Now, tribal sovereignty means giving the tribes the opportunity to speak how they want to govern and how they want to live and how they want to see their tribe flourish. And what's important about that is that the United States government understands and acknowledges that what works for my tribe in Healy Lake is not the same that's going to work for another tribe, and it shouldn't be.
In 1975, in keeping with the new policy of supporting tribal self-determination, the U.S. Congress passed the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, Public Law 93638. This federal law authorizes Indian tribes to exert more control and management over programs and services that the federal government would otherwise provide to the tribes and their citizens, if the tribe chooses to do so. Such control may include deciding how these services are delivered and tailored to meet the specific needs of their communities. Tribal sovereignty is the cornerstone of the government-to-government relationship that the U.S. has with tribal nations. Why is it important for federal employees to understand tribal sovereignty? Because having a better understanding of tribal sovereignty will improve how you interact with and serve tribes, and is key for meaningful and effective collaboration between the United States and tribal nations.
Tribal nations predated the colonial settlement of the U.S. and the Constitution itself, and are an integral part of the essential constitutional fabric of the U.S. The U.S. Constitution acknowledges tribal nations as sovereign entities. As one example, it provides Congress with authority to regulate commerce with Indian tribes as well as commerce with foreign nations and among the several states. In addition, our constitutional system recognizes three types of domestic sovereigns within the United States: the federal government, state governments, and tribal nations.
The Supreme Court has also acknowledged the status of tribal nations as separate sovereigns pre-existing the Constitution. Tribal sovereignty was challenged in the United States Supreme Court in the 1830s. It was during this time that Chief Justice John Marshall articulated the fundamental principle that has guided the evolution of federal Indian law to the present. Tribes possess a unique nationhood status and retain inherent powers of self-government. When we say that tribes have inherent sovereignty, it means that their sovereignty stems from their prior independent status as nations and not from the Constitution or other federal law. The Constitution and federal laws recognize tribal sovereignty. They do not create it. In addition to tribal sovereignty, you may have heard about tribal treaties. Tribal treaties are legally binding agreements that the United States entered into with tribal nations, just like treaties that the United States has entered into with foreign nations. It is because tribes have inherent sovereignty that the federal government could enter into treaties with tribal nations. Consider this: treaties are entered into between nations. So the concept of tribal sovereignty is a unique one and is integral to understanding treaties between tribes and the federal government.
Along with the Constitution and federal laws, treaties are the supreme law of the United States. Tribal treaties and what are known as reserve rights are the heart of this series of training courses, so we'll be hearing a lot more about those in future episodes. Not all tribes have treaties with the federal government, but the government-to-government relationship and the general trust responsibility applies equally to all federally recognized tribes, whether they have treaties or not. If you have questions about treaties and their relationship with your agency's specific programs, please contact your agency's legal offices and tribal liaison.
The concept of tribal sovereignty is integral to understanding the federal government's unique government-to-government relationship with federally recognized tribes. This course is designed to give all federal employees a basic understanding of key principles of tribal sovereignty and aspects of the federal-tribal relationship, including how tribal treaties reflect and inform that relationship. Sharing a common understanding of these principles will help the federal government to work with tribes more consistently and more effectively. There are more than 570 federally recognized tribes in Alaska and the lower 48 states, and, as explained earlier, each one is its own sovereign nation. This complexity is part of the reason that this course is so important.
This course aims to provide federal employees with foundational knowledge so as to strengthen the nation-to-nation relationship that exists between the federal government and tribal nations. Your takeaway for this episode is that a tribe's sovereign status predates the Constitution, is recognized by the Constitution, and affects how you serve, engage, and work with tribal nations. Treaties are just one aspect of tribal sovereignty and the trust relationship between the United States and tribes. Now that you've completed this module, you should have a deeper understanding and appreciation of tribal sovereignty and be able to describe why it is important. Honoring treaties and the trust relationship is an important way that the U.S. continues to recognize the sovereignty of tribal nations. In the next episode, we will dive into the rich history and purpose of tribal treaties, which remain powerful instruments of law to this day and represent the enduring promise of the United States.